The concept of fairy tale love has always been a subject of fascination and skepticism. For some, it's an enchanting possibility. For others, a cruel illusion. Caroline Crouch belonged firmly to the first camp. She believed in soulmates, the kind of love that transcends logic and circumstance. She knew, even as a young girl, that she was destined for a love story that would defy convention. Her conviction was unwavering, and by the time she turned 18, the man who had captivated her heart, a charming, ambitious pilot, was already by her side. Their whirlwind romance, marked by grand gestures and intimate moments, seemed plucked from the pages of a storybook. Against the backdrop of the idyllic island of Alonissos, they vowed to create a life together, free from the confines of societal expectations. But love, as enchanting as it may seem, often conceals shadows. Beneath the surface of their perfect picture lay whispers of unease. Decisions made in the name of passion have a way of unfolding in unforeseen ways, and Caroline's belief in her fairy tale would soon be tested in ways she could never have imagined. The life they built together, once filled with promise, would become the setting for an unimaginable tragedy, one that would send shockwaves far beyond the tranquil shores of Alonissos. For the woman who chased her dreams with unyielding fervor would find herself at the center of a dark, twisted story. And in the end, the question would not be whether their love could withstand the test of time, but whether it had been her undoing all along. In today's episode of our true crime series, we unravel the heartbreaking story of Caroline Crouch, a case of a woman whose bold decision to elope with her soulmate sparked a mix of curiosity and skepticism. But just 2 years later, the discourse of whether their fairy tale love would conquer the obstacles was no longer the topic. In the vibrant heart of a bustling city, a young woman named Caroline Crouch resided, harboring a spirit of adventure and a deep affinity for the picturesque island of Alonissos. Her innate curiosity and passion for exploration were nurtured from a tender age. Caroline's upbringing on the serene island, where her parents, David Crouch and Susan Della Cuesta, had sought refuge from Athens' urban chaos, profoundly shaped her. The tranquil atmosphere and breathtaking landscapes of Alonissos instilled in her a profound love for the island and its unique charm. As she grew, Caroline's dreams and aspirations began to take shape, deeply rooted in her connection to Alonissos. Caroline was a free spirit, with a curiosity that knew no bounds. She spent her days exploring the rugged coastline of Alonissos, diving into the crystal-clear waters of the Aegean Sea, and chasing after the colorful butterflies that fluttered through the olive groves. She had a wild imagination, and her parents often found her curled up with a book, lost in a world of fantasy and wonder. From a young age, she had been enamored by the world of aeronautics, fascinated by the sleek planes soaring through the sky with grace and power. As she grew older, Caroline found herself drawn to a handsome and dexterous pilot who seemed to embody everything she had ever fantasized about. The man had a magnetic charm that captivated her, and his skills in the aeronautical world only served to deepen her admiration. But it was at the age of 15 that Caroline's life would take a dramatic turn. It was a warm summer day, and she was walking along the sandy beach, her feet sinking into the soft golden sand. Suddenly, the sound of a helicopter pierced the air, causing her to look up in awe. The sight that greeted her was breathtaking. A sleek, black helicopter performing daring stunts in the sky, its blades slicing through the air like a knife. As Caroline watched in amazement as the helicopter landed on the beach, kicking up a cloud of sand, out stepped a young man, tall and handsome, with dark tousled hair and a confident smile. He introduced himself as Babis Anagnostopoulos, a successful businessman and pilot who had come to Alonissos. Babis was everything Caroline was not, charming and sophisticated. He swept her off her feet with his tales of adventure and his mesmerizing blue eyes. In no time at all, they were inseparable, spending hours talking and laughing, exploring the hidden corners of the island together. However, there was one major obstacle standing in the way of Caroline's fairy tale romance: her age. She was just 15. She was still in the early stages of adulthood, while the pilot was much older and more experienced. Babis was 27 at that time. Despite this, Caroline's heart yearned to be with him, to live out the fantasy she had built in her mind. And so, the moment she turned legal, Caroline made a bold decision. She would elope with the man of her dreams, throwing caution to the wind and embracing the whirlwind romance that beckoned to her. As Caroline's 18th birthday approached, Babis surprised her with a romantic getaway to Portugal, where he had planned a romantic wedding on the cliffs, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. It was a day of magic and love, with Caroline looking resplendent in a flowing white gown, her eyes shining with happiness. Little did she know that her fairy tale love story would soon take a dark and twisted turn. The man she had fallen for, the one she had thought was her Prince Charming, was capable of the unspeakable, and took away her ability to ever speak again. On a fateful morning of 11th May 2021, in their rented apartment, the facade of love and affection crumbled to reveal the cold and callous heart of a killer. In front of their 11-month-old child, a heinous act was committed that shattered the illusion of fairy tale love once and for all. Babis would go on to narrate what happened on that tragic night. It was a few hours after midnight when the peaceful silence of a suburban neighborhood was shattered by the sound of breaking glass. 3 hooded figures, armed with guns and intent on violence, crept through the darkness towards a modest 2-story house. They moved with precision and purpose, their eyes focused on their target. The robbers made their way to the back of the house, where they found an open basement window. Without hesitation, they slid inside, their movements swift and silent. The family dog, a loyal companion who had been sleeping peacefully, suddenly woke to the sound of intruders. With a yelp of alarm, the dog leapt to its feet and bared its teeth, ready to defend its home. But the robbers were prepared for this possibility. In one swift motion, they grabbed the dog by its leash and hoisted it up, hanging it from the stair rail. The poor animal struggled and whimpered, its eyes pleading for mercy that would never come. The sound of the dog's distress echoed through the house, reaching the ears of the couple who slept upstairs in the loft. Startled awake by the commotion, they sat up in bed, hearts racing with fear. Before they could even begin to comprehend what was happening, the robbers burst into their bedroom, guns raised and demands clear. "Where is the money?" demanded the leader of the trio, his voice cold and menacing. Babis, with a tired eyes and a trembling voice, tried to reassure the robbers that he had no money hidden away. But the leader of the trio knew he was lying. He had done his research and was sure that the family had some stash hidden somewhere. At this time in Greece, most people didn't keep their money in banks because of the continued risk of bankruptcy, so the robbers were confident that they wouldn't leave empty-handed. On the other hand, Babis proved stubborn. He refused to give away his hard-earned savings, in which he wanted to buy a family house for the comfort of his child and wife. But his stoicism was only for a short period after the pistol was pointed at the neck of his 11-month-old. He crumbled and indicated the location where they would find the 10,000 euros, hoping to appease them and protect his family. At this point, he had struggled and fought with them with all his strength. But how could he overpower 3 armed robbers with Albanian accent? He was tied up and his mouth was covered with duct tape. But the trio wanted more. They wanted to make a fortune out of them, so they searched for jewelries and other valuable items so that they could sell at a pawn shop and make some money. On their way out, Caroline, who had trained in martial arts for years, refused to cower in fear. Looking at her jewelry box, she sprang into action. With a fierce cry, she launched herself at the armed intruder, her hands and feet moving in a blur of motion. For a moment, it seemed as though she might overpower the robber, her skills and determination giving her the upper hand. But the leader of the trio was quick to react, tackling her to the ground and pinning her beneath his weight. With ruthless efficiency, he silenced her struggles, his hands tightening around her throat until she lay motionless and still. Babies, overwhelmed by the horror of the situation, could only watch in silent horror as his beloved wife was taken from him. He pleaded with the robbers to spare his life, to let him see his daughter grow up. But his words fell on deaf ears as the intruders bound and gagged him, leaving him tied up on the bed, his mind reeling with shock and grief. As the robbers made their escape, slipping back out through the basement window and into the night, Baby's world crumbled around him. He slipped into unconsciousness, his body racked with sobs and his soul filled with despair. After he regained consciousness again, he dialed the emergency number with his nose and waited for help. Of course, his hands and legs were still tied up. When the police arrived at the scene, their faces grim and determined, they found the house scattered and in a frenzy. The memory card from the surveillance camera had been removed, the evidence erased by the robbers who had stolen more than money that night, but had also stolen the family's sense of security. The lead detective was a seasoned veteran who had seen his fair share of crime scenes, but nothing quite like this. The house was in complete disarray, with furniture overturned and personal belongings strewn about. As the forensic team combed through the house for fingerprints and DNA evidence, they searched but nothing was found because these intruders worked calculatedly and moved with precision. So in the end, they had no clues whatsoever, or where to start investigating from, except, of course, for the only witness who knew his left from his right, Babis. His child was immediately brought to safety as interrogation started outrightly. The detectives sat down with Babies to get more details about the night of the robbery. Babies showed up as a brave man who, having endured such a traumatic experience, is willing to help with the investigation as he recounted the events of that night with clarity and determination. Babies, although in and out of consciousness, had a retentive memory. He was able to recall the size of the perpetrators. He described them as huge and tall. He also remembered the exact firearm that two of the robbery's trio used to terrorize himself and his family. He mentioned a black pistol and a silver Colt. He volunteered to give a vivid description of the intruders, and they artist came up with a tall, dark-skinned, overweight individual. Babies insinuated that since he drifted in and out of consciousness, the perpetrators might have thought he was dead, believing they left no witnesses behind. Additionally, the hood of one of the perpetrators was found, and this was the only physical clue that could help the police get these criminals. The police believed the story and speculated from Baba's account that perhaps they tried the front door through a dirt road that led to the house. And since they couldn't gain entry, they used the window in the basement by taking off security pins. The dog might have raised an alarm, so they unalived the dog using its own leash. Also, after making do with the cash in the Monopoly box and jewelry, they smothered Caroline with a pillow. But they made no sexual advances as there was no sign of sexual assault. The police also conjectured she might have struggled for some time because of her elongated, labored breathing and bruises on her lips. But his story was just a little too clean, wasn't it? Could someone in his state really remember every detail so vividly? And if not, what might he be hiding? Just 5 days after his beloved wife's passing, he shared a cherished memory from their wedding day, accompanied by a simple yet powerful phrase, "Always together. Farewell, my love." The poignant post captured the hearts of many, as the pilot's heartfelt message conveyed the depth of his grief. The Instagram post served as a tender tribute, honoring their love and the life they built together. The pilot's words, though brief, spoke volumes about his devotion and the enduring bond they shared. The Hellenic Police's Crimes Against Life Department swiftly took charge of the investigation, driven by a steadfast commitment to justice. Despite the absence of fingerprints and DNA evidence, they suspected a disturbing pattern, a potential femicide, echoing a string of misogynistic crimes in recent months. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, authorities announced a substantial reward of €300,000 for any information leading to the perpetrator's capture. This call to action urged the public to come forward and assist in bringing the culprits to justice. The police forcefully denounced the brutality of the crime, emphasizing their dedication to protecting women and combating gender-based violence. As the investigation unfolded, the department worked tirelessly to unravel the case, leaving no stone unturned. With the community's help, they sought to track down the individuals responsible and ensure accountability for the heinous act. The reward offered a beacon of hope, encouraging whistleblowers and witnesses to step forward and contribute to the pursuit of justice. During the initial days of the investigation, a 43-year-old man from Georgia was apprehended as he tried to flee across the border into Bulgaria with a fake passport. However, after thorough interrogation and investigation, no evidence connecting him to the case was found. The police officers then turned their attention to the escape vehicle of the perpetrators, and this led the authorities to analyze security camera footage from nearby establishments. However, despite their efforts, they were unable to find any leads related to the case. Investigative doubts crept in, shattering initial assumptions. He fought off the intruders, yet there were no signs or marks on his body. So this hinted that this might not be a femicide after all. The lack of fingerprints and DNA evidence only deepened the uncertainty. Suspicion shifted toward babies, sparking questions. Was he deceiving investigators? Was he hiding something? The implausible scenario of a large intruder squeezing through the basement window, silently overpowering the husky, Roxy, and committing the crime without disturbing the neighborhood or Babbies himself, raised red flags. Neighbors' testimonies contradicting Babbis's account, denying any loud sounds or barks that fateful night, further fueled investigators' skepticism. They launched an intensive probe into Babbis's story, meticulously re-examining every detail. This scrutiny led to a startling revelation, one that would upend the entire investigation and cast a sinister light on Babbis's involvement. The truth, once hidden, began to unravel, plunging investigators into a dark and unsettling reality. One of the key breakthroughs in the case came from the analysis of digital evidence from the couple's devices. Discrepancies were found in the timeline provided by Babbis during his statement to the authorities. The memory card of the camera had been removed at 01:20 a.m. instead of 04:30 a.m., the time Babbis claimed the robbers had entered the house. Additionally, Caroline's biometric watch showed her heart had stopped beating at 04:11, raising suspicions about the accuracy of Babbis's account. The deeper the investigators dug into Babbis's story, the more cracks began to show. One of the most damning revelations came not from the crime scene, but from Babbis's mobile phone. What the investigators found was chilling in its simplicity. Despite his claim of being bound and gagged, unable to move or act, his phone told a different story. Certain apps had been opened and running during the exact window he claimed to be immobilized. Notifications had been swiped away. Activity logs betrayed subtle but undeniable signs of interaction. How could someone supposedly tied up, struggling to survive, manage to operate a phone? Was this a desperate attempt to stage a scene? Or had his lies begun to unravel in the face of cold, digital evidence? The phone, once an afterthought in the investigation, now became a silent witness, a keeper of secrets that couldn't be erased. Investigators knew they were onto something, but the question remained. If Babis wasn't a helpless victim that night, then who was he? And more importantly, what else was he hiding? On the 17th day of June 2023, after attending Caroline's memorial service in Alonissos, Babis was asked to accompany detectives to Athens. He was told they had a lead on the case and a new suspect was found. It was when he arrived at the capital that he was revealed as the prime suspect. He was broken after 8 hours of questioning. Following a lengthy testimony, he confessed to murdering Caroline, citing frequent marital conflicts as the motive. So finally, after 38 days, Babis was caught. As the investigation pressed on, the pristine facade of a perfect couple began to crack, revealing shadows where trust and love once stood. What seemed like a tragic story of a family torn apart by violent intruders began to feel less like fact and more like a carefully constructed performance. The deeper authorities delved, the more they uncovered whispers of deceit and betrayal, unraveling a web of lies that stretched far beyond that fateful night in Nera. Babis's attempt to mislead investigators by fabricating a robbery story was driven by his desire to ensure their 11-month-old daughter, Lydia, wouldn't grow up without either parent. His confession led to charges of murder, animal abuse, false reporting, and false testimony. The trial verdict, delivered on May 16, 2022, found Babis guilty of murder, animal cruelty, and misleading authorities. He received life imprisonment, an additional 10 years for the dog's execution, and a €20,000 fine. David Crouch, Caroline's father, recently spoke out about his son-in-law Babis Anagnostopoulos, who murdered his daughter in 2021. In a shocking twist, Anagnostopoulos wrote a detailed account of the events leading to Caroline's death in a letter to David. Caroline's death was one of dozens of femicides in Greece that year, sparking widespread outrage and concern. David Crouch has since spoken out about his son-in-law's involvement in drug running, which he believes was the motive behind Caroline's murder. According to Crouch, Anagnostopoulos' involvement with a drug trafficking gang led to Caroline's tragic death. Apparently, Anagnostopoulos had been approached by the owner of a restaurant he and Caroline frequently visited, who was involved with the gang and offered him a lucrative deal to work as a helicopter pilot. Crouch claims that Anagnostopoulos made the grave mistake of sharing this information with Caroline, who understandably reacted by threatening to leave him immediately. The gang, feeling threatened by Caroline's potential to expose their operations, allegedly ordered Anagnostopoulos to get rid of his wife. Fearing for his own life, Anagnostopoulos brutally murdered Caroline in front of their young child. Babis Anagnostopoulos' lawyer, Alexandros Papaioannidis, has fired back at David Crouch's allegations, suggesting that Crouch's motivation stems from the upcoming hearings. Papaioannidis questioned the validity of Crouch's claims, stating that they were never part of the case file and don't reflect reality. He also asked for evidence of the letter supposedly written by Anagnostopoulos, implying that Crouch has his own reasons for making these claims. This disturbing revelation comes at a critical time, as the custody battle for Caroline and Anagnostopoulos' daughter, Lydia, is set to resume in a Greek court. Anagnostopoulos' family has appealed the decision, granting the Crouch family exclusive care of Lydia, adding another layer of complexity to this already heartbreaking case. Upon appeal, The Mixed Court of Appeal in Athens reaffirmed the original verdict on September 29, 2023, resentencing Babis to life imprisonment, 11 years and 6 months, and a €21,000 fine. In the aftermath, Caroline's family gained custody of Lydia. Carolinecrouch's story is one that lingers, not just because of its shocking brutality, but because it shines a light on the hidden darkness that can exist behind seemingly perfect facades. Her tragic death is a reminder that the monsters we fear most are often the ones closest to us, hiding in plain sight. This wasn't just the story of a crime. It was a wake-up call to a society grappling with the stark reality of femicide. In Greece, where Caroline's life was cut short, the rising tide of gender-based violence has sparked outrage and deep introspection. Her murder became a symbol of the systemic failures that allow such tragedies to happen. A failing not just of one man, but of a culture that too often leaves women unprotected and unheard. In 2021 alone, Greece saw a record number of femicides, each one a silent echo of Caroline's fate. But this isn't just Greece's problem. It's a global epidemic. How often must stories like Caroline's be told before we, as a society, confront the biases, the indifference, and the broken systems that perpetuate these horrors? This is where our fascination must evolve into action. We dissect these cases, unraveling every detail, but are we doing enough to honor the victims? Let Caroline's story be more than just another case file. Let it be a rallying cry for awareness, education, and reform. If this case struck a chord with you, take the next step. Learn about the signs of domestic abuse. Share resources and helplines with those who may be in danger. Caroline didn't have the chance to fight the system, but we do. The legacy of a victim shouldn't just be the tragedy of their end. It should be the change their story inspires. Let's make Caroline's story matter. Join the conversation in the comments below. What more can be done to prevent tragedies like this? How do we create a world where love doesn't turn lethal? If you're new here, consider subscribing to stay informed about stories that matter, not just for the intrigue, but for the lessons they leave behind. Together, we can ensure that these stories are not forgotten, and that they serve as a catalyst for change. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, every story has layers, but it's the truths they reveal about our society that matter most.